Time to talk about the leadership stat. Now I'm going to do this a little bit differently than I've done some of my stat guide content in the past. We're going to do this in battle format. This will also be different from some of my other battles in that I'm going to be slowing down, pausing, and explaining some things in detail. So definitely stay tuned. I think both newer and veteran players alike can learn some things. So, talk about leadership, the stat here. Basically, it defines your unit's will to fight. And if a leadership drops below a certain threshold, your unit will either rout in the case of living units or crumble in the case of undead. Routing units, they just run away, their flag turns white, they can be killed, or chased off, they're not going to fight back. While they're running away, undead units, on the other hand, take crumbling damage, which amounts to 10 damage per second for the entire unit. Meaning in 30 seconds, they take the same amount of damage that one damage over time effect from the Poison Wind Mortar does, not the missile itself, just the damage over time effect. So it is a very, very slow HP drain. And, of course, disintegration and shattering. Unit shatters, flag goes fully white, and it cannot come back from routing. Units can come back from routing, and disintegration, the banner turns into confetti, and the unit just falls over, basically. So, let's talk about some different leadership effects as this battle's in slow-mo starting out. You can see here that the leadership stat's slightly green, and if you mouse over, you can see the modifiers of the unit's leadership. So, for Skeleton Warriors, they have a base value of 30, flanks are secure, gives them an extra 5, and Lord nearby gives them an extra 4. So, you'll notice right away that units having their flank either compromised or secure will affect their leadership. Anything from winning or losing combat, taking damage, both overall HP damage taken, and if you take HP damage within a certain time frame. Missile attacks, note that artillery and small arms count separately, so for example, this Warp Lightning Cannon is different leadership effect than these Skeleton Horse Archers, and I will be able to stack. I've got here Screaming Skull Catapults, and Casket of Souls, both of which count as artillery. I can stack those leadership malices with small arms of the Skeleton Horsemen, right? So as the Skeleton Horsemen start to fire in here, these Skaven Slaves, or to Ikit Claw rather, you can see his leadership will drop down under missile fire, -5. So he doesn't like being shot by that. I mean, who does? Being shot's generally an uncomfortable thing. Something else to note about all undead is that they cause fear, right? And fear is just a flat debuff. We're going to watch as these Skeleton Horsemen charge in. You can see they have this fear effect here. And once they charge into the Skaven Slaves, let's go ahead and have a look at what's happening under the hood in their leadership. Damage sustained, -14, losing currently, and frightened by enemy unit, -8. So fear simply provides -8, and of course losing currently also provides -8. Likewise, that damage sustained counts both overall damage taken and damage taken within a given time frame. I believe there's 2 time frames. One is, I want to say 3 seconds, and the other is like 12 seconds. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember 100% the numbers off the top of my head, but just understand there's 2 kind of short time frame windows where, like, for example, these Skaven, now, they're being attacked probably from the flank. Yeah, okay, so let's go ahead and pause here. There's quite a bit to unpack. Their damage sustained, -21. They took some shock damage, a considerable amount of their HP, a percentage, right, about 30%, give or take. Attacked in the rear, -14. Damaged by artillery, -10. Notice that's different from the one we saw earlier of being shot. And frightened by enemy unit, yeah, -8 once again. So you can see that a unit with low leadership like Skaven Slaves, you only really need to stack a couple of those modifiers, and even if they haven't lost combat too hard, which they often will, they will run away quite easily. So here I'm up against Way, and I'm just hitting and running with these Skeleton Horsemen. We've got a bunch of Skeleton Warriors up front, a Tomb Scorpion, which causes terror. We'll get to that in just a minute. Arc in the Black also has a spell which causes terror, Aspect of Dread Knight. I've got some Chariots getting massacred by Warp Lightning Cannons there. We've got some Archer Horsemen over on the far side, and yeah, the Screaming Skull as well also has a leadership debuff. Discourage is a common leadership debuff, -8 leadership, so that we can stack as well, in addition to these other effects here. But the Archer Horsemen, just kind of ping-ponging in and out. We're trying to shoot the Warp Lightning Cannons with the bows as much as we can, because that will actually blow up the artillery pieces themselves. Keep in mind, immune to psychology is a trait which allows a unit to be immune to both fear and terror. Terror, basically, as you should know, causes a unit to rout at higher leadership thresholds. So you'll notice the little like skull and bones icon pop up on their unit card, and they will just go running for the hills. Units which cause terror are immune to terror. And again, units which are immune to psychology are also immune to terror and fear. Units which cause fear are also immune to fear, believe it or not. So yeah, as we kind of look through here, let's have a look at some of these different leadership situations here, and we'll just kind of pop in slow motion and mouse through. Yeah, flanks exposed, you can see, whereas we saw the flanks protected earlier, flanks exposed now -6, and friends routing -3. Clan rats do not have the expendable trait, which means that they will provide that debuff to other nearby units. Units which are expendable, like these, there should be some Skaven slaves still hanging around here somewhere. Yeah, these guys, this expendable trait means they will not give that friends running leadership debuff unless the other unit is also expendable. So yeah, just some various effects there. You can see kind of all stacking. We come over on this side, then the terror kicks in. You can see they rout at a higher leadership threshold, right? Because of the terror. Units which recover their leadership enough will come back, but terror does last a certain amount of time. I forget exactly how long. But you see now the units are coming back from rout, and they can be commanded to get back in the fight. Things are going pretty well for me so far, I have to say. The leadership of the army-wide fear of undead is definitely showing here, and the fact that my units only crumble. Like, yeah, the Scorpion just goes down there, but you can see that the Skeleton Chariots are not even crumbling. Disintegration, so the basically undead shattering, only happens when a unit reaches -2 times its base leadership. So, as an example, Ark of the Black here, who is currently duking it out with some Brood Horrors, has 75 base leadership, and oh man, Ikit coming in with the wild attack animations. Oh, Ikit, what are you doing, dude? So he has 75 base leadership, Arkan does, which means he would need to hit -150 to actually enter disintegration, like the unrecoverable phase. So what that means is essentially higher tier undead units are effectively unbreakable. Like, they will take some crumbling damage, maybe a few hundred crumbling damage throughout the course of a battle, you can say, perhaps. But it's almost impossible to get them to actually disintegrate, and sometimes you'll even see them push through army losses because leadership is high enough that they are not disintegrating. But anyway, you can see Ark and the Black over here, still in this pitched engagement. More clan rats going to be summoned up here, and the Plague Priest also draining this pocket very well. It's going to use the Plague spell, which you don't see super often. Or no, that's the Brass Orb, sorry, from Ikit. He has been using the Plague spell, but Ikit's just been continuously Spirit Leashed. If we take a look at his leadership situation here, you can see his base value, 65, damage sustained -53, and flanks exposed as well. Unfortunately, it doesn't show the damage within a short time frame and the total damage sustained differently. It kind of aggregates them and adds them together. Or not aggregates them, rather, but just adds them together, right? And here, this one, these clan rats getting shot by artillery and having the debuffs. You can see they both a couple things quickly wore off there. That was sort of the damage taken, right, within a given time. But the damage by artillery and the frightened, the discouraged effect, rather, both last for some time. Oh yeah, let's see there. Yeah, losing currently also procs when they are getting hit by missiles and not being able to fight back at all. That is something to be noted, that you can lose missile combat. And I don't know, well, let's look over here. I'm just curious, can you actually win missile combat? That would be interesting. Winning current combat, that's hilarious. We're all learning something today. I didn't realize that units could actually be winning current combat from shooting someone. That's hilarious. But anyway, coming back to this kind of pitched leadership engagement here, we've got a Nishabti summon going on the Plague Priest here, trying to do as much damage. He's popped his Scrying Stone to keep that damage resistance buff up, but now it drops. His leadership is okay for the time being, but exhaustion also starting to play in a factor. So Vigor doesn't start to affect leadership until quite late in the game, and you can see here, Lord fled recently. The Lord recently left the battlefield, or died both give a significant leadership penalty there. Faster and stronger enemies nearby, I think is because of the Ushabti, I want to say. Flanks exposed, under missile fire, exhaustion. You can see how these stacking modifiers can lead to, units, even high leadership units like Lords and Heroes getting routed by that type of situation. So just kind of wanted to highlight, because there was a lot of leadership interactions in this specific battle, and kind of my objective here was largely to try and utilize leadership to my advantage against the Skaven. So that's a clear advantage Tomb Kings have, is army-wide fear and the crumbling versus routing mechanic. I would say crumbling is objectively much stronger. Like, it's just, routing is much weaker. It's supposed to be that undead units' stats are balanced around that fact, and they are to a degree, but in some cases not really, especially with their elite units. And like even some of their mid to low tier units can trade quite well, and Skaven are an interesting example. We'll kind of compare some of their low tier units after the fact, but here's a fun interaction. So we're Spirit Leeching this Plague Priest, so he's taking a bit of damage. Suddenly this is a weird situation. If I lose Arcan here, I could actually facilitate a little bit of a comeback. So this catapult fires in. Let's check out the leadership. Already the clan rats are at -25. Damage sustained, Lord fled, damaged by artillery, frightened, discouraged, and losing. So they're likely to rout anyway, but I want to just make sure. I'm going to go ahead and cast Aspect of Dread Knight on Arcan the Black, so he causes terror, and instantly the clan rats terror out. Plague Priest also gets terrified because he is not immune to psychology. The Packmaster coming back around is going to be the last one alive, so we'll fast forward through his demise. Although it is going to be interesting, I guess, to just kind of take a look at his different leadership modifiers as he fights in this combat. He's attacked in the flank, attacked by artillery, flanks exposed. And note that attacked in the flank and flanks exposed are two different things. Also losing current combat, very, very tired. And now, attacked in the rear and attacked in the flank, which notice are two separate modifiers, so it can be worthwhile to charge a unit from both the side and the flank at the same time, because those are two different leadership modifiers. So hopefully you guys saw some of the leadership modifiers there. I know it was a little bit different pacing than some of my normal battles because of all the pausing and slowing down and so on, but I really wanted to go under the hood there and show you guys what's happening in terms of some of those modifiers, and that can inform the way you play, right? Like I said, charging from multiple directions at the same time, while a thing has just been hit by an artillery piece, or after a unit is being shot by, other things. Keep in mind that you can also stack, like I said, the leadership ability effects, like Discouraged. Burnt is another common one for many units with flaming damage, especially flaming missile damage. There's a number of different Lord and Hero leadership effects you can do in an AoE, either on demand or passively. Those are all things to keep in mind, right? And especially against factions which leadership is an issue. Skaven, Greenskins, Beastmen all come to mind immediately, where their kind of average leadership on their unit is not amazing. It's definitely something that you can take advantage of, and just regardless, if a unit's routing, it's not fighting. If a unit's disintegrated or crumbled completely, then it's also no longer fighting, but that's a little harder to do. Just going through the damage values here. One thing to note about the damage valuations in this post-battle screen is it does not reflect the units which have routed off, which for Skaven can sometimes be a considerable amount of their army value. So I actually, if you were to add up all the damage value here, now granted there are some healing units as well, so that kind of balances that out, but probably a lot of my units did not actually pay for themselves. Skeleton Horsemen are absolute MVPs here. That fast cav, I say fast in quotations, fast against Skaven cav, decent stats, and fear is really, really nice here. They actually probably beat the Skaven Wolfrats just because Wolfrat leadership is so bad that the fear plus the kind of the damage they can deal probably would be too much. The Skeleton Horseman Archers, same thing, very cost effective. A lot of my units ended up not paying for themselves, though, and that's because the Skaven, a lot of them just routed off the side. Even Ikit actually technically survived, but did run away. Both the Brood Horror and the Plague Furnace got some decent value as well, but a lot of these chaff units just literally zero value, because they just immediately run away from the spooky undead. especially being hit by artillery and small arms and, you know, other stacking effects, flanks getting collapsed and so on. Skeleton horsemen archers are running around shooting random things. It all adds up in the end, and well played away, great game to him. Had quite a few fun games with him recently, but this was just an interesting one to kind of showcase that that leadership situation, right? So, yeah, how do I kind of tie up this discussion with a nice little bow? I've pretty much said most of what I wanted to say, but just be aware that this is one reason why I often complain about Crumbling, because it's such a strong mechanic, and not only that, but undead also have typically a lot better access to healing magic. But for all non-undead factions, it is definitely something to consider. You know, your terror effects, leadership effects, different things you can do to buff and debuff leadership, right? It's always something to be aware of, these AoE Lord leadership buffs. Once you kind of learn the damage value, or the valuations of the modifiers for leadership, you realize plus 16 is actually pretty decent, so it can very often be worth taking to help hold units in the fight. Yeah, I'm not really sure how to end this if you hadn't realized, but hopefully that video informed you about some things. It definitely was not an exhaustive extent of leadership penalties and modifiers and so on. There's still, you know, a host of other things I'm sure you guys will think of, but just again to touch on some common ones here. In terms of Lord abilities, we saw that pretty much most generic Lords will have some kind of leadership AoE buff. A lot of the legendary Lords do as well. Sometimes it comes with a melee attack or melee defense component, sometimes it does not. But the heroes and Lords all have this encourage trait, as do some units, like Aspiring Champions, for example, which will also provide that same leadership buff in a nice little pocket. It's not a lot, but it is definitely something. Lord, keep in mind that Lord Fled and Lord Died are two different modifiers. Now, obviously, you can't stack them, but if the Lord flees the battlefield, that modifier eventually wears off, right? If the Lord dies, the modifier wears off and is replaced by another modifier, which is still, I think it's -8 or -10, something like that. So if your Lord flees, it is better for you than if your Lord dies in terms of leadership. There's some other kind of small things you'll learn if you really kind of go all into the subject, but I definitely recommend check out twwstats.com. That's basically Total War Warhammer Stats.com, but abbreviated, right? Where you can actually look, and the creator there has basically like run the numbers. He has all the equations of everything. He has a lot of the leadership modifiers listed out as well. So you can kind of look and see what the different modifiers are, how much they stack. Like, for example, the percentage HP. Like if you take 50% of your HP damage within 3 seconds, which is a very short amount of time, that's an immense amount of shock damage, but it can happen. You know, if you're a light unit and you get punched in the face by some shock cavalry, for example, then, you know, your unit will probably just rout, right? Will suffer a significant leadership debuff. And if you want to look at all those kind of in-depth, I would definitely recommend checking out. I may even leave a link down in the description below. So hopefully you guys enjoyed watching. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Almost said modified. Your leadership will be modified for sure. So thanks again. Share if you found it useful. We'll see you next time.